The notification sound was the same as always, soft, polite, like it had no idea what it had just done. Wire transfer confirmed. 98 sounds, $400.90 sent to Harborview Estate and Events. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the school where I teach 3rd grade, eating a granola bar I'd found at the bottom of my bag, staring at that number until my eyes went blurry. $98,400. Gone in the time it takes to blink. My emergency fund. My down payment. The thing I had been quietly, carefully building for 6 years, while everyone in my family assumed I was just scraping by like the rest of them. To them, I was just the responsible one, the boring one, the one who brought Tupperware to holidays instead of wine, who drove a 9-year-old Subaru with a cracked dashboard vent, who shopped at Target and bought twice before ordering an appetizer. I was the oldest. I was the quiet one. I was the one who did everything right and never got credit for any of it. My brother was the star. He always had been. His name is Brandon. He's 3 years younger than me, and he has this gift, not a skill, a gift for making a room love him in under 60 seconds. He married a woman named Serena 2 years ago. Her family has money the way some people have furniture. So much of it, they've stopped noticing it's there. Her father owns a chain of medical imaging centers across the southeast. Her mother sits on the board of an art museum. They were, in my parents' minds, exactly the kind of people we were supposed to want to impress. When Brandon and Serena announced they wanted to renew their vows for their 2nd anniversary, a full ceremony, a party, the works, my parents lost their minds with excitement, not because they were romantic about it. Because Serena's parents were going to be there, along with half of their social circle, and my parents had spent 2 years pretending to be something they weren't, and now they needed a venue worthy of the performance. The problem was money. My parents had never been great with it. My dad had taken early retirement on a pension that sounded generous until you divided it by actual expenses. My mom had put herself through a real estate license course 3 years ago and sold exactly 4 houses. They had credit card debt and a home equity loan, and the specific kind of financial anxiety that expresses itself as spending more, not less, because the alternative is admitting the truth. So my mother called me. She didn't open with the ask. She never does. She opened with nostalgia. Do you remember that summer we took you kids to the Outer Banks? Your brother got stung by a jellyfish, and then she slid into it the way cold water slides under a door. Almost before I realized what was happening, she was crying. Quietly. The way she cries when she needs something. We just don't want to embarrass him in front of Serena's family. You know how they are. You know what they'll think if we show up with paper tablecloths and a Bluetooth speaker. Brandon deserves better. He's finally happy. He finally has everything he worked for. She didn't say, and you don't. She didn't have to. I had been sitting on that investment money for a year, trying to decide what to do with it. I bought some shares in a biotech company during the pandemic on a total gut instinct and a tip from a colleague who knew someone, and those shares had done something I still don't fully understand how to explain. I told no one, not because I was hiding it exactly. More because I'd watched my family's relationship to money my whole life, and I knew that the moment they found out I had it, it would stop being mine. But my mother was crying, and Brandon was happy, and I had always believed that if I was just generous enough, just good enough, they would eventually look at me the way they looked at him. "We'll pay you back," my dad said, getting on the phone. "This is just a loan. You'll have it back in 18 months. We're getting a refinance sorted." I said yes. I wired $98,400 to Harborview Estate and Events on a Tuesday afternoon in March, sitting in a school parking lot eating a stale granola bar. And I told myself it was going to be worth it. The first sign that something was wrong came 6 weeks before the event. My mother called to go over the seating chart and mentioned, almost in passing, that they'd moved me from the family table. "We just think it makes more sense to have the immediate family, Brandon, Serena, us, Serena's parents, at the center table. It photographs better, you understand." I understood that I had paid for the photographer. I said okay. The second sign came 3 weeks later, when Serena texted me about the bridesmaid dresses. Except I wasn't listed as a bridesmaid. I was listed as a guest. I texted back to ask if there was a mistake. She replied with a string of heart emojis and something about how she was sure I'd understand that she wanted to keep the bridal party intimate and that of course I was still so important to them and she hoped I knew that. I knew that I had paid for her dress. I said nothing. The last time came 4 days before the event. My mother called on a Saturday morning and I could tell from the first syllable that she was doing the voice, the too careful voice. The voice that sounds like she's reading from a script she wrote at 2 in the morning. Sweetheart, we've been thinking about the event and we think it might be better if you didn't come to the ceremony. I was making coffee. I set the mug down very slowly. What? It's not that we don't want you there. You know we do. It's just Serena's family is going to have a lot of people there, important people, and you know how you get a little. She paused, choosing carefully, a little intense when you're nervous. And we don't want anything to make Serena uncomfortable on her special day. How I get. You know what I mean. You can be a little awkward in social situations, honey. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Some people are just better one-on-one. I had a master's degree. I coached the school debate team. I had given a speech at a faculty assembly 3 months ago and received a standing ovation from 200 people. But sure, too awkward for the party I had funded. We'll send you photos, she said, and we'll bring you a plate of food after. Brandon really wants you to know he appreciates everything you've done. Does Brandon know you're calling me? A pause that told me everything. Of course, she said. We talked about it as a family. I hung up and stood in my kitchen for a long time, very still, the way you stand when something breaks inside you and you're trying to figure out exactly what it was. Then I picked my phone back up and saw a text from my aunt, my mother's older sister, who lives in Asheville and who I have always been closer to than anyone else in the family. It said, "Honey, I heard about what you're dealing with. I'm so proud of you for getting the help you needed. I know it must have been hard to take that step." I read it 3 times, getting the help I needed. I called my aunt immediately. She answered on the second ring and started to say something gentle and supportive, and I interrupted her. "What did you hear?" Silence. Then that you'd been struggling with anxiety and depression, that your parents had helped you check in somewhere for a little while. An outpatient program, they said. They were very worried. I sat down on my kitchen floor. Not because I chose to, because my legs just stopped working. They hadn't said I had the flu. They hadn't said I was traveling. They had told our family, my aunt, presumably my cousins, possibly other people I hadn't heard from yet, that I had checked myself into a mental health program. They had turned my absence into a narrative. A sad, sympathetic, manageable narrative that made them look caring and explain me away in one clean sentence. I was a third-grade teacher. I had a professional reputation. I had parents of my students who knew my family. I had colleagues who went to church with my cousins. I didn't cry. I think I was too cold for tears at that point. I felt the way a room feels right before a thunderstorm, pressurized, heavy, everything waiting. My aunt was still on the line asking if I was okay, and I said, "I'm fine. I'll explain everything later. I have to go." I opened my closet. I had a dress I'd bought last fall for a colleague's gallery opening. Deep burgundy, structured, the kind of dress that walks into a room before you do. I hadn't worn it yet. I put it on. I did my makeup slowly and deliberately, the way I do when I need to feel like myself. I called a car because I didn't trust my hands on the wheel. I was not going to the event to celebrate. I was going because $98,400 has a way of buying you a seat at the table whether you're on the guest list or not. Harborview Estate was on the water, which I had specifically requested when I was corresponding with the venue coordinator, a woman named Dana, over the course of 4 months of emails and phone calls. The ceremony space faced the bay. The reception hall had floor-to-ceiling windows. I had approved every upgrade, negotiated the menu with the caterer, chosen the floral package. I had spent more hours on this event than I had on my own apartment. I arrived during cocktail hour, which meant the ceremony was over and people were scattered across the terrace with champagne flutes and those small crab cakes I had selected from the tasting menu. I walked in through the side entrance near the catering kitchen, the one I knew about because I had done a walkthrough with Dana in January. Dana was the first person I saw. She recognized me immediately, and her expression did something complicated. Relief mixed with alarm. She pulled me to the side of the doorway, away from the catering traffic. "Miss Callahan," she said, keeping her voice low. "I didn't know you were going to be here. Your family said you were—" She stopped. "They said you wouldn't be coming." "I changed my mind," I said. "How's everything going?" "Fine," she said. "Everything's running well." "Actually, I'm glad you're here, because I've been trying to reach someone on your family's side all afternoon about an outstanding balance." The floral overage from the ceremony installed, the garlands on the dock were more than the estimate. It came to $3,200 above the contracted amount. "I sent 3 emails to your mother and she hasn't responded. Normally we just run the card on file at the end of the night, which your card flags anything over a certain threshold for manual approval." "And how much is left on the total balance?" I asked. "Including the floral overage and the final food and beverage minimum." She glanced at her tablet. $61,400. The deposit covered the first portion, but the remainder is due upon completion of the event, per the contract. I looked at her. She looked at me. "Who signed the contract?" "You did," she said quietly. "As the primary account holder. Your parents were listed as event coordinators, but the financial liability is mine," I said. "Yes, I know." I stood there for a moment. Through the window, I could see the reception hall, already set up beautifully, the candles, the low centerpieces of white ranunculus and eucalyptus that I had specifically chosen because Serena had mentioned once, casually, that she loved the smell of eucalyptus. The string quartet was playing something soft. Serena was laughing at something her mother said. Brandon was glowing the way he always glows, that particular brightness of a person who has never in his life doubted that he deserves the room he's standing in. And my parents. My dad had a new blazer. My mother had a dress I'd never seen before. Pale blue, the kind you buy for someone else's wedding when you want to look like you belong there. I probably paid for those too, in some indirect way I'd never be able to prove. I almost turned around. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. I stood in that doorway and I thought about my car, about going home, about ordering Thai food and watching something on TV and just not doing the thing that was about to happen. Because I knew what it would cost, not in money, in everything else. But then my aunt's text came back to me. "So proud of you for getting the help you needed." All the people who had read that text and believed it. All the people who would go home tonight and shake their heads sadly over my situation, my poor parents so worried, so brave, handling it so gracefully. I took a breath. I walked into the reception hall. The first person to see me was my cousin Jess, who was standing near the bar. Her mouth fell open. She grabbed her husband's arm. I kept walking. My mother saw me from across the room and her face went through 5 expressions in 2 seconds. The 5th one was the one she chose to perform. Her hand flew to her chest. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, loud enough to carry. She moved toward me with her arms out, not for a hug, I realized, but to intercept, to get between me and the room. "Honey, what are you doing here?" "You're not supposed to be. You need to be resting," the doctors said. "I'm not seeing any doctors, Mom." "You're confused," she said, quieter now, close to my ear. "You're not well. Let me take you outside and we can talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about outside," I said. "I'm here for the party." Brandon appeared at my mother's shoulder. For a moment, something moved across his face. Something that might have been guilt if I gave him enough credit. But then Serena's hand was on his arm, and he straightened. "Olivia," he said, "you shouldn't have come. This isn't a good time." "It's literally a party," I said. "You know what I mean." I did. I had always known what they meant. I had spent my entire life translating it. Serena's father, a tall man named Douglas with the particular physical confidence of someone who has never been told no, appeared beside Brandon. He'd clearly noticed the commotion. He looked at me the way you look at a problem. Is everything all right? Everything is fine, my mother rushed in. This is Olivia, our daughter. She hasn't been well, we weren't expecting her. I wasn't well, I agreed, but I'm feeling much better now. Douglas looked between us. My dad materialized from somewhere, slightly flushed, and I could tell from his eyes that he'd had 2 or 3 glasses of the wine that I had approved from the tasting list. He put his hand on my elbow. Olivia, let's go get some air. Actually, I said, not moving. I was just talking to Dana. Silence. The venue coordinator, I added helpfully. My mother's eyes flickered. She mentioned there's an outstanding balance, I continued. $61,000. Due tonight. Brandon's expression shifted. Serena looked at her husband. That's being handled, my dad said, his voice dropping into the register he used when he was trying to sound authoritative. That's none of your concern. It's actually entirely my concern, I said. Because my name is on the contract. I don't think Serena's father was expecting that. I watched him recalibrate. Your name, he said. I funded the event, I said. I kept my voice even, not angry, just factual, the way I teach my 3rd graders to present information. The venue, the catering, the florals, the photography, the string quartet. I transferred $98,400 in March. The remaining balance is due tonight, and my parents haven't made arrangements to cover it. The room had gone quiet around us. Not the whole room, the string quartet was still playing, and people on the far side were still talking, but a little corner of it had gone still in that particular way that happens when people realize they're watching something real. That's not, my mother started. I have the wire transfer confirmation, I said. I have 4 months of emails with Dana. I have the signed contract which has my name on it in my email right now if anyone would like to see it. Douglas looked at my father. Robert, what is she talking about? My father opened his mouth. Nothing came out. We were managing the funds, my mother said, rallying. Olivia gave us the money as a gift. She agreed to contribute. I agreed to loan it, I said, with the understanding I'd be paid back. And I agreed to contribute to the event I was going to attend. Then I was uninvited 4 days ago. Douglas turned to look at Brandon. Brandon was looking at the floor. You told me your family was covering the costs, Douglas said slowly. His voice had changed. You told me your parents had savings from the business. Dad's business has been closed for 3 years, I said. Not to be cruel, just because it was true. Serena made a small sound. She looked at Brandon. He still wasn't looking up. Dana appeared at the edge of our group, quiet and professional, tablet in hand. She had the quality of someone who has seen many difficult situations and has learned to be a very calm surface for them to bounce off of. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, but I do need to resolve the balance question before we move into dinner service. Ms. Might. Callahan, are you authorizing final payment from your account on file? Everyone looked at me. I thought about what I'd said yes to 6 months ago. The crying phone call. He's finally happy. He finally has everything he worked for. The implication, never spoken, that I had not. The tie was the practice child, the placeholder, the one who got the family's rough draft before they figured out how to do it right with Brandon. I thought about my aunt's text, so proud of you for getting the help you needed. I thought about $61,000. No, I said. I'm not authorizing it. My mother made a sound like she'd been struck. Dana, I continued, I'd like to invoke the clause in the contract about disputed liability. Since my presence at this event was revoked by the secondary coordinators without my consent, and since the narrative being used to explain my absence constitutes defamation of my professional character, I'm formally disputing my obligation for the outstanding balance. I'd suggest you direct the payment request to the event hosts of record. I looked at my father, who represented themselves as having the financial means to host this event. Dana nodded slowly. She was very good at her job. I understand. Sir, she turned to my father. I'll need a form of payment for the outstanding balance of $61,400. We do accept all major cards and can arrange a payment plan through our billing department, but I'll need something on file before dinner is served. We don't. My father started, then stopped. We don't have it, my mother said. Her voice had lost its shape. We don't have that kind of. Then I'd recommend calling your bank tonight, Dana said, not unkindly. I'll give you 20 minutes before I need to pause service. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. The before silence had been tense, anticipatory. This one was just empty. The kind that comes after something finishes falling. Douglas excused himself with a short nod and went to find his wife. I watched them talk in low voices near the window, both of them looking at Brandon, who was still studying the floor like it owed him something. My mother reached out and grabbed my wrist. You are destroying your brother's marriage, she hissed. Do you understand what you're doing? I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm just not paying for it. I gently removed her hand. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that because I had cried so much in private over the years, in my car, in the shower, at my kitchen table at midnight, trying to understand why being good was never quite good enough, and I had no tears left for this particular moment. I was clean out. I walked back to where Dana was standing and asked her, very quietly, for the contact information for her billing department. She handed me a card. I thanked her. I walked toward the exit. My cousin Jess intersected me near the door. Her eyes were wide. Olivia, what just happened? Ask your aunt, I said. She'll explain. I went outside. The bay was dark and very still, the lights from the marina reflecting in long, wobbly lines across the water. I stood on the dock for a few minutes. It smelled like salt and low tide and diesel from the boats. It wasn't glamorous. It was real. I called a car. While I waited, I texted my aunt the wire transfer confirmation, the contract, and 4 months of emails with the venue coordinator. Then I texted her, I'm not in any program. I'm standing on a dock in a burgundy dress. I'll call you tomorrow and explain everything. She responded in under 30 seconds, I know. I always knew something was off. Call me whenever you're ready. I love you. On the way home, I asked the driver to stop at a diner I like on Route 7 that's open until midnight. It's the kind of place with laminated menus and coffee that tastes exactly like coffee and nothing else. I ordered scrambled eggs and wheat toast and a glass of orange juice. It came to $11.50. I left a $10 tip because the waitress called me home and refilled my coffee without being asked. And those are two things I needed very badly right then. I sat in that booth for a long time. I watched a man in a booth across from me helping his kid with what looked like a math worksheet. Both of them bent over it with the same serious expression. I watched the cook move around behind the counter with the quiet efficiency of someone who has done a job long enough to stop thinking about it. I watched the parking lot through the window, cars moving in and out. I wasn't sad exactly. I wasn't happy. I was something that doesn't have a clean name. Some combination of exhausted and clear, like after you've been sick for a long time and you finally feel the fever break. In the weeks that followed, the accounting was extensive. Douglas and his wife left the event before dinner was served. I know this because Jess texted me a play-by-play that I did not ask for and did not discourage. Brandon and Serena had what Jess described as a long, serious conversation in the parking lot. Serena's mother had apparently been asking questions about the family's finances for months, and this confirmed several of her suspicions. Dana, true to her professional word, sent my parents a final invoice. My father called me 4 times in the 2 days after the event. I let every call go to voicemail. On the 4th message, he said something about how I had always been jealous of Brandon, how this was my way of sabotaging his happiness, how they were family and family didn't do this to each other. I listened to that one twice. Not because it hurt. It did, a little. The way an old injury aches in cold weather. but because I wanted to remember exactly what it felt like to hear the thing I'd been afraid was true, said out loud, plainly, by the person who'd always implied it. And to realize that hearing it out loud, named clearly and directly, made it smaller than it had been when it lived unspoken between us. My aunt drove down from Asheville 2 weeks later and took me to lunch. We sat across from each other at a restaurant with good light, and she listened for 2 hours while I told her everything, all of it, starting from the phone call in the parking lot and going back further, years further, to all the small ways I had tried to earn something that was never actually on offer. At the end, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know the money isn't coming back." "I know," I said. "Does that feel okay?" I thought about it. "It feels like a clean bill," I said. "Like I finally know what I was paying for?" She nodded. She understood. "I'm not going to tell you that everything is resolved because it isn't, not in the way stories are usually resolved. My parents and I are not speaking. Brandon and Serena are, according to Jess, working through some things, which could mean anything. I don't know if Serena's family pulled their financial support or just their goodwill. I don't know if my parents figured out how to pay Dana, or if there are further consequences I'll hear about eventually through the family telegraph. What I know is this: I went back to school the Monday after the event and taught my third graders about the water cycle, which involves evaporation and condensation and the way water keeps moving in a loop, always becoming something new without losing what it fundamentally is. One of my students asked if clouds ever get tired of raining, and I said I didn't think so. That rain was just what clouds did, and that doing the thing you're built for doesn't feel like work in the same way. She seemed satisfied by that. I drove home in my 9-year-old Subaru with the cracked dashboard vent. I made pasta for dinner. I watched something forgettable on TV. I have started a new savings account. It has $200 in it, which is not $98,400, but it is entirely and without complication mine. I look at the balance sometimes the same way I used to look at the bigger number. Not for what it is, but for what it represents. Which is simply, I know now what I'm building, and I know for whom. I've thought a lot about why I said yes in the first place. Not the surface reason, my mother crying, my father's hand on my shoulder, the promise of being paid back. But the real one underneath all of that. The honest answer is that I believed, somewhere I couldn't quite see clearly, that love between people who are supposed to love each other is something you can earn. That if I gave enough, showed up enough, asked for nothing enough, eventually the scales would tip and I'd feel it. The thing I was always waiting to feel. That belief cost me $98,400, but I think I would have paid more if I'd had it, and that's the part I've had to sit with the longest. What happened at Harborview wasn't karma in any dramatic sense. There was no lightning bolt, no single moment where the universe intervened on my behalf. What happened was much simpler and, in a way, more honest than that. The truth was just always there, waiting. My name was on the contract. The numbers were in my bank records. Dana had 4 months of emails. None of that appeared out of nowhere on the night of the event. It had been true the entire time. The only thing that changed was that I stopped hiding it. That's the thing about choices made from a place of wanting to be seen a certain way. They require constant maintenance. My parents had to keep the story straight. The uninvitation, the mental health cover, the performance of being generous parents managing a difficult daughter, and eventually, stories like that develop too many moving parts. Douglas asked one question, one direct question, in front of the right people, and the whole structure came apart because structures built on concealment always do. Not because the universe punishes dishonesty, just because reality is stubborn. It keeps being true whether you're looking at it or not. What I keep coming back to is Olivia. Myself, though it still feels strange to think of her that way. As someone I'm looking at rather than inhabiting. The version of me that wired that money wasn't weak or naive in the simple way it might look from the outside. She was trying to solve a real problem with the wrong tool. The problem was, I wanted my family to value me. The tool was money. And money can buy a lot of things, but it cannot purchase the regard of people who have already decided what you're worth. I know that now in a way I couldn't have known it before I tried. What I learned, slowly in the weeks after, not in a revelation, more like something that settles the way sediment settles in water, is that integrity isn't about being right in front of other people. It's about being consistent when no one is watching. I had been consistent for years in ways that didn't serve me, consistently silent, consistently accommodating, consistently willing to shrink. Courage, the real kind, turned out not to be dramatic at all. It was just walking into that venue in a burgundy dress. It was saying one word, no, to Dana, in front of everyone, and meaning it completely. My third graders teach me things constantly, without knowing they are. One of them asked me once why we have to do hard things, and I said something automatic about growth and challenge. But the real answer, the one I've come to since that night on the dock, is simpler. Because doing the hard thing is often the only way to find out who you actually are. I spent years being the person my family needed me to be. I'm still figuring out who I am when that pressure is gone. But I know she drives a 9-year-old Subaru, tips generously at late-night diners, and has $200 in an account that belongs entirely to her. That's enough to start with.